You can own a gun for decades and still believe myths that could get you seriously hurt, or even charged with a felony. Not because you're careless, but because bad information gets repeated until it sounds like fact. Let's clear up some of the biggest myths. Before we begin, remember that gun laws vary by state and sometimes even by city or county. This isn't legal advice. It's about separating fact from fiction. Always check your local laws or consult an attorney. With that said, let's get started. Myth 1. I'll just rack the slide to scare them off. This is one of the most dangerous pieces of advice still circulating, and it comes straight out of Hollywood. The idea is that the sound of a slide racking is so universally terrifying that an intruder will simply turn around and leave. Here's the problem. A home invader who's already committed to breaking into an occupied house is not a rational actor operating on movie logic. That sound might do nothing. It might also tell them exactly where you are, in the dark, while you're standing there unready to actually fire. If you're not prepared to use the firearm, you shouldn't be advertising that you have one instead of using the 2 seconds you just spent to get to a defensible position. Myth 2. Warning shots will keep me safe, legally and physically. A warning shot feels like the responsible middle ground. Scare them off. Nobody gets hurt. Everybody goes home. In reality, a warning shot is a bullet fired with no target, which means you are legally responsible for wherever that round ends up. It could go through a wall into your neighbor's bedroom. It could come down blocks away and hit someone you never saw. In the vast majority of jurisdictions, firing a warning shot is treated as reckless discharge of a firearm, and it can turn a legitimate self-defense situation into a criminal charge against you, even if the intruder was never touched. If a shot isn't justified as a shot at a threat, it isn't justified as a warning either. Myth 3. Buckshot doesn't overpenetrate like a rifle round. A lot of shotgun owners believe buckshot is inherently safer inside a home because it's made for close range. Buckshot absolutely overpenetrates drywall, hollow core doors, and multiple interior walls. And multiple pellets means multiple chances for one of them to keep traveling into a room you can't see into. The type of ammunition matters far less than most people think, once you're talking about interior walls in a typical house. Every round you fire indoors, shotgun or rifle, needs to be treated as a round that could end up somewhere you didn't intend. Myth 4. If they're in my house, I can legally shoot them, no questions asked. This is probably the single most dangerous legal myth in the entire gun community, because it convinces people that presence alone justifies deadly force. It doesn't, not in most states. Castle Doctrine laws generally still require that you reasonably believe the person poses an imminent threat of death or serious bodily harm to you or someone else. An intruder standing frozen in your living room with their hands up is a very different legal situation than one advancing on you with a weapon, even though both are technically in your house. Prosecutors and juries look at the totality of the circumstances, not just the address where the shooting happened, where the person was standing, what they were doing, whether they were retreating, whether you continued firing after the threat stopped. All of it gets picked apart afterward. "He was in my house" is the beginning of the legal analysis, not the end of it. And treating it as a blank check is exactly how otherwise justified self-defense cases turn into manslaughter charges. Myth 5. I can shoot someone who's just running away with my TV. This one gets people prosecuted more than almost any other misunderstanding on this list. In the overwhelming majority of states, deadly force is legally justified to stop an imminent threat to life, not to protect property. A burglar running out your front door with your television is committing a property crime, and once they're fleeing, the imminent threat has generally ended in the eyes of the law, no matter how angry or justified you feel in the moment. Shooting a fleeing person, even one who just robbed you, can turn you from the victim of a burglary into the defendant in a homicide case. Property is insured. it is not worth a murder charge. Myth 6. Open carry is legal everywhere in my state, so I'm fine. Open carry laws are a patchwork, and legal in my state often ignores an enormous list of exceptions: school zones, federal buildings, courthouses, certain government property, private businesses that have posted no firearms signage, and sometimes entire cities or counties with stricter local ordinances layered on top of state law. Someone who assumes blanket legality because they read one sentence on a gun rights website can walk straight into a felony without ever intending to break any law at all. Knowing your state law is the floor, not the whole picture. You also have to know the federal, local, and private property layers stacked on top of it. Myth 7. As long as I'm not pointing it at anyone, brandishing isn't a real charge. A lot of gun owners think brandishing requires actively aiming a firearm at someone. In many states, simply displaying a weapon in a threatening or intimidating manner, even without pointing it directly at a person, is enough to trigger a brandishing or menacing charge. Pulling a firearm out during a road rage argument to make a point, even holstered, even held at your side, has gotten people arrested. If a reasonable person in that situation would feel threatened, you may have already crossed a legal line before you ever raised the weapon. Myth 8. I don't need to know federal law, state law covers me. State law and federal law operate independently, and being fully compliant with one does not protect you from the other. Someone can be completely legal under their state's firearm statutes and still violate federal law around things like interstate transport, certain modifications, or purchases across state lines. The reverse is also true. Federal legality doesn't override a stricter state or local law. Gun owners who only study one layer of law are operating with half the picture, and prosecutors at either level are not going to give you credit for having checked the other one. Myth 9. A private sale means no background check, no paper trail, no problem. Private sale rules vary dramatically by state, and a huge number of states now require background checks on private sales, not just sales through licensed dealers. Someone operating on outdated information from 10 or 15 years ago can unknowingly commit a serious federal or state offense by transferring a firearm to someone who turns out to be a prohibited person, especially if it can be shown they had reason to know. "I didn't ask" is not always a defense, and no paper trail is not the safety net a lot of people assume it is. Myth 10. My concealed carry permit is good in every state. Concealed carry reciprocity is one of the most misunderstood areas in the entire gun world. Permits are honored state by state through individual reciprocity agreements, not automatically nationwide, and those agreements change constantly as state laws get updated. A permit that was honored in a neighboring state last year might not be this year. Crossing a state line while armed, without checking current reciprocity, is one of the most common ways law-abiding gun owners end up facing serious charges, sometimes during a routine traffic stop hundreds of miles from home, for something they genuinely believed was legal. Myth 11. If a cop asks, I don't have to tell them I'm armed. Whether you're legally required to disclose that you're carrying during a police encounter depends entirely on your state. Some states have a duty to inform law built directly into the concealed carry statute. Others don't require it at all. Treating this as a nationwide rule in either direction is exactly how a routine traffic stop turns adversarial fast. Knowing your specific state's disclosure requirement, and knowing it before you're sitting in the driver's seat with an officer at your window, is not optional homework. It's the difference between a calm interaction and one that escalates in about 4 seconds. Myth 12. Hollow points are illegal to carry for self-defense. This myth refuses to die, partly because it's true in one narrow context. Hunting regulations in some states restrict certain expanding ammunition, and partly because of decades-old urban legend about hollow points being outlawed, or treated as excessively cruel. For civilian self-defense carry, hollow point ammunition is legal in the vast majority of the country, and is, in fact, generally the recommended choice, specifically because it's less likely to overpenetrate than full metal jacket ammunition. People who avoid it because they think it's illegal are often choosing objectively worse ammunition for home and personal defense based on a myth that has no legal basis in most jurisdictions. Myth 13. If I'm defending myself, I don't need to call the police first. After a self-defense shooting, the person who calls 911 first and provides a calm, basic account of events is, practically speaking, in a dramatically better position than the person who doesn't. Delaying that call, leaving the scene, or waiting to think it over gets interpreted by investigators as consciousness of guilt, even in a completely justified shooting. This isn't about legal technicality so much as basic reality. The first version of events that reaches law enforcement tends to shape the entire direction of the investigation, and silence or delay almost never helps the person who was actually defending themselves. Myth 14. Talking to police at the scene helps my case. This sits right next to myth 13 and seems to contradict it, but it doesn't. Calling 911 and identifying yourself, confirming you're the one who called, and confirming there's a threat that's been neutralized, is different from giving a detailed, uncoached statement about exactly what happened while you're still in shock, adrenaline-flooded, and processing trauma in real time. People in that state routinely misstate details, get timelines wrong, or say something that sounds inconsistent later. Not because they're lying, but because that's what happens to memory under extreme stress. The standard advice from most defense attorneys is simple. Identify yourself, confirm you're the victim and need medical or police response, and then say you'll cooperate fully once you have legal representation present. That's not obstruction. That's protecting yourself from your own adrenaline. Myth 15. I'll just say it was self-defense and that's the end of it. Claiming self-defense doesn't end an investigation, it starts one. In most jurisdictions, self-defense is what's called an affirmative defense, which means you're not simply denying you did it. You're admitting the shooting happened and arguing it was legally justified. That shifts real analytical weight onto the specific facts. Was the threat imminent? Was the response proportional? Did you have a reasonable belief of danger? Could you have safely retreated where the law requires it? Saying the phrase, self-defense, is not a legal shield. It's the opening argument in a case that still has to be proven, and treating it as an automatic get-out-of-jail explanation is exactly how people who were genuinely justified end up making it harder on themselves during questioning. Here's the pattern running underneath every single one of these myths, and it's worth sitting with. Almost none of them come from bad intentions. They come from repetition. Somebody heard it from a buddy at the range, or a forum post, or a movie, and it sounded confident enough that nobody questioned it. And confidence gets mistaken for accuracy constantly in this specific space, because the stakes are so high that people want certainty, and myths offer certainty even when the law itself doesn't. The uncomfortable truth is that gun law in this country is not simple, not uniform, and not something you can fully learn once and consider finished. It changes by state, sometimes by county, and it gets updated more often than most gun owners realize. The people who stay safe, both physically and legally, aren't the ones who know the most tactical tricks. They're the ones who've actually sat down with their specific state's statutes, or better yet, an attorney who practices in that state, and confirmed what's actually true where they live, rather than what sounded true in a comment section.